was what we have in Dundee is some really well-established and really good examples of community groups and community structures that are making real impact on their community. And we also have a kind of participatory budgeting through the Community Regeneration Forum, where groups of those local people are able to take pots of money and distribute it in their locality. But what if you've still got ideas and views about what you want to do in your community, but you don't want to join a formal group, or you don't want to get involved in formal local community planning processes? And we were beginning to think, how do we actually broaden that base of participation? Because everybody in a community has got ideas about what should be going on in their community. And so at the same time, or kind of just before that, COSLA and the Scottish Government had announced the ambition that 1% of all mainstream budgets should be decided by participatory budgeting by 2021. And there have been a number of participatory budgeting exercises, I think in Angus and Perth and Kinross and elsewhere across Scotland prior to this. But Dundee City Council's leadership, political leadership, were the ones, I think, the first to say, actually, we are going to try and do this through mainstream budgeting. Now, what we got was £1.2 million of infrastructure funding, which is not quite the 1%. I think that would need to be around about 4 million, possibly closer to 3 million before it was the 1%. But it's a serious chunk of cash to decide to hand over to communities and say, what are you going to do with it? So we got this £1.2 million and we were told, right, go and carry out a participatory budgeting exercise. We had some kind of learning outcomes for ourselves, because if local people are spending this money in their own community, so what? So what difference is that actually going to make to that local community? So we said we wanted local people meaningfully involved in what was happening through this process. We wanted to widen our base of participation. We've got some really good, really committed community activists in Dundee, but we really need to kind of broaden that base of participation. We really wanted to involve young people in participative democracy. It was the year of the young people. It is the year of the young people, young person, sorry. So that's something that we're really keen on exploring as well. We wanted it to be an educative process, because as communities officers, it's often myself and Mike will be the first port of call with a phone call saying, why don't you just do up all that road? Or why don't you change where those traffic lights are? And why don't we just build a brand new park there? And quite often that's resource led as to why you could or couldn't do that. Sometimes there's legislation about it, about where you put 20s plenty areas and where you put traffic lights and all this thing. So we wanted it to be an educative process for the communities in Dundee. And we really wanted to just test it. It was a bit of a test of change for us as well, about learning for the future, about what kind of processes work. So the next thing was to go and design the process, and we really made a conscious effort that we wanted to co-produce this with local communities, and that local communities should be involved from the start. Now, in your best practice participatory budgeting exercise, communities would be right in at the start, coming up with the ideas about what would happen in their community, and then there would be some sort of filter process, and you'd be able to take that long list down to a short list. We had to cheat, I'm afraid. Not quite cheat. We were told in August by our elected members, here's your 1.2 million, off you go and do it in January next year. And we're like, oh God, right, so how do we do that? But, well, not luckily, but fortunately, we had done Engage Dundee, and we had 6,000 people had responded to a place standard questionnaire. So even though at that point they weren't getting asked, what would you do if you had X amount of pounds in your community, it was able to give us a base to where we could actually start from. And if we go and do this again in the future, yeah, we will do a far more kind of intensive initial exercise to get that idea generation, but we just had to go with what we had there. What you can see here is what we managed to come up with. This is what the website looks like. Now, it's worth saying at this point, we did get a grant from the Scottish Government to enable us to buy in some consultation work from Democratic Society, from PB Partners, and to go and buy in the website support, which actually came from Iceland. So I talked about 1.2 million. That was split evenly across the 8 wards in Dundee, so it was £150,000 for each of the wards, and that's what you came up with here. You would click on the ward in which you lived. And there was chat about that, because we were saying, well, does Broughty Ferry or the West End, that are perhaps more affluent in the North East or Strathmartin, need that £150,000 just the same, but the decision was taken that we would just, I think even for simplicity, if nothing else at this stage, that's what we'll go and do for this one. So this is what you would open up if you lived in the Lochee ward of Dundee, and you would see each of these projects, and you could click on the button there, and it would bring up a map, and it would bring up a description of what the project was, and obviously it's got the cost beside it as well. At the top here, you can see your 150 grand, and as you go and click along these, it takes the money off your virtual wallet, so you can see how much you've spent. So that was kind of the educative process. So you could keep going down, and you'd see you only had 20 grand left, and the other thing you wanted to vote for was 50 grand, so you got rid of something else and you changed it about. So it was more than a wish list. It was about actually, these are some of the decisions that council officers have to take all the time, or elected members have to take all the time, or anybody, about actually what are the real priorities here rather than just everything that you would like. So that's what people did. Everybody had tablets, and I spoke about the website. We made a decision it was online only. So we had lots of help from our press team about getting the website out on all the social media and in the papers, so people could just sit and do it in their own house. But we also recognised that people would need additional support in order to do that, to do the IT. And we kind of thought long and hard about it, and we thought the way that everything is going is digital, and the way you help people through that is not help them find ways in which they avoid that, is actually sit down with them and support them and teach them how to do it. So we went out to sheltered lounges and sat with the tablets and sat through with the residents there. We went out to Deaf Hub, we went out to the Yard, which is a place for children with additional support needs. We went to the Cairn Centre, which is a drug and alcohol centre. So we were looking at all the different places where people would be in Dundee who might need that additional support. But we were also making sure that we were out in communities in tablets, like say we were in the shops, we were in community centres. The way we might have done this in the past is booked a room like this and put flyers out in the area and said, everybody come to us and come with a bit of paper and vote on the day. And in fact, we did do a bit of that, and certainly in my ward it really wasn't successful. We got about a dozen people along, and that's what you'd get, about a dozen people along. Whereas if I'm standing outside Asda on a Saturday morning, I can get 50 people in one go. Or if I'm up at Tannadice on a Saturday afternoon, actually only got about 20 people there as well. Yeah, but actually going to where the groups already were, going to where people already were. Parents' nights were a fantastic way of us getting it. Parents' nights, you could get 120, 130 people in one go who were in that community. So what happened, we got a total turnout of 11,472, which was something around about, I think, 10% of the people who were eligible to vote, which just was kind of astounding. Dundee-wide, you can see here from your SIMD and SIMD1 and SIMD2, over 50% of the people took part were from SIMD 1 and 2 areas. Now, you might say, okay, that looks good, but actually 60% of people in Dundee live in SIMD 1 and 2 areas, so they're still underrepresented, but it's certainly much higher representation from SIMD 1 and 2 than we get in any other form of participatory democracy, including, votes, elections, all that kind of thing. So we deliberately targeted those SIMD 1 and 2 areas to make sure we were able to get that. Young people, this is the whole process, so 21% of respondents, so if my maths is right, around about 2,500 people from 11 to 17 took part. So they're tomorrow's voters, they're tomorrow's community activists, they're tomorrow's participants in any sort of democracy and community activity, and at 11 to 17 they're already getting involved in making decisions about their community. We got a lot of feedback as well. We didn't think we'd get so much feedback. We got 4,000 people actually filled in the feedback form at the end, which is really unusual for things like this. And so 76% of people had said they'd never taken part in any community decision before. So again, broadening that base of participation beyond what we already had. And most crucially, 87% said they would take part again. So if we do go and do it again, at least we know that people have actually thought it was worthwhile. People are saying it's an effective way of increasing community involvement in decision making, and this was the educative thing. It helped me understand infrastructure costs. 78% of people said that. So this is what the community fed back to us. Stuff about the website was good. This is the one I like. This is our chance to get back to the council about what we want. More information on budget breakdowns. You know, they thought the website and the things was good, because that's what people were coming back with when they'd filled in the form. But PB Partners said we'd got some money from the Scottish Government, we commissioned them, and they've actually come up with an evaluation report of the process, so that's available electronically. So staff are saying people can literally see the difference PB's making. There's a number of different ways you can do PB. You could do it about procuring services, but we think this way of doing it, where there's big infrastructure things that happen in a community, you can go out and see that. You can go and see the new park, you can go and see the new path down by the Dichty Burn. Whereas if you're procuring a youth work service, absolutely really important, but maybe doesn't give that visual impact that people are really making a difference right there in the heart of their community.